Welcome to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I'm your host today, and I have as a guest Dr. William Vranos. Welcome, Bill,
Good
and
morning.
thanks for coming and joining us.
My pleasure.
We appreciate you being here. We usually start our programs with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your family. So what would you like to have us know about you?
Well, you know, I am from New England. I grew up in Connecticut. I was born in Worcester and grew up in Connecticut. And when I was looking to start my practice, we moved back here from Dayton, Ohio, where I was in the Air Force, because I wanted to be back near my family and raise my kids in New England. Most of my immediate family is either in Connecticut or Massachusetts, and so we came back to this area and we're happy to be here.
How many years did you serve in the Air Force?
3 years.
3 years?
Right.
And did you get your medical training through that service at all?
There's a program called the Health Profession Scholarship Program, and basically you trade money for years. So they paid for my medical school for 3 years, and I owed 3 years of active duty service because of that, and because they needed orthopedic surgeons, they allowed me to do my orthopedic surgery training prior to going into the Air Force.
So you didn't fly planes, but you took care of anybody that got hurt.
Right.
Good. We need all those pieces. It's amazing what all has to come together in any operation to make it work.
Well, when people are deployed, if you have a pilot who's deployed to Iraq or some other area, he is very concerned that his family is taken care of. And the best way you can support an active duty mission is to support their family.
So you're there for all the families too. I mean, it's just not the service person; it's the
active
military
duty members and their families and retirees. So, again, you know, it's one less thing for the active duty person who is on mission to worry about if he knows his family is well taken care of.
Good. So your family, where is your home? Where do you live right now?
Right now, I live in Greenfield.
Greenfield.
I have 3 children, and of course, I'm married.
And what are their ages?
My daughter Marina is 14. My son Jake is 12, and my son Mark is 10. And it's an interesting family because each one has very unique personalities and needs. Especially my middle son Jake has autism, and so that's an additional challenge or a responsibility that we have.
And we'll talk about that a little later in the show.
Sure.
When one becomes a physician, it's a long road of education and so forth. So what drove you to take on all that work?
Well,
what made you do that?
You know, a certain aspect of it is just the challenge. It's a very exciting career where things are constantly changing, and the challenge of keeping up and being in somewhat of a competitive field is something that I enjoy. Besides that, if you think you have a certain set of skills and you want to contribute to the health and well-being of your neighbors and friends, being a physician is a great way to accomplish that. And
you're an orthopedic physician?
Yes.
Or do you call him orthopedic surgeon?
Surgeon.
You go orthopedic surgeon. We'll get all our terms right here. What are some of the new the things that the orthopedic surgeons can do today that they couldn't do before? How has the science evolved and the training evolved?
Well, I think the 2 areas that are currently the most active is, first, minimally invasive surgery, minimizing scar size, minimizing incision size, doing more and more procedures arthroscopically that used to be done with open incisions. Even larger procedures like joint replacement can be done through smaller and smaller incisions with proper instrumentation and new methods of aligning and so forth. So I think the trauma of our surgeries, some of which can be quite extensive, is becoming more and more limited with time. And the second thing is biologically, still kind of there's always that little bit that's on the horizon that you keep hoping for, but biological replacements for cartilage and bone grafting and so forth are...
So are we getting close to the point where we can grow cartilage? And would you insert it, or do you put a little injection that makes cartilage grow back? Is that coming?
Well, right now we can insert it. It's limited though to very localized areas of injury. We're not at the point yet where we can take a knee that has more global, like an arthritic knee that has where the cartilage is pretty much destroyed in all the areas of the knee. But if you come to me with an injury with a localized area of cartilage damage, we can replace that cartilage.
Oh, I didn't know that. And what are you replacing it with?
Cartilage.
Cartilage?
Yeah.
Is it that person's cartilage? Do you grow it in a dish and then put it in? How does that
Well,
work?
yeah, that's one technique.
Is it?
It's autologous chondrocyte transplantation. They actually send it to Genzyme,
Uh-huh.
and we take a little biopsy, send it to Genzyme. They grow it in a dish, and then we put it back in you.
Uh-huh.
Another technique is to just transplant cartilage from one area of your body to another area, and there are actually areas that have cartilage to spare.
Okay. Because sometimes you hear about different animals, things like shark stuff and
Right.
things like that. So I think
Yeah.
the science sounds like it's growing away to being almost more natural, more from yourself.
Yeah, but there's not a lot natural about it when you get right down to it.
No, but more from
Yeah.
yourself. You take your own cells and
Right,
grow them, so you
right,
don't have those
right.
rejection type
Yeah.
problems.
Well, it's not really rejection. It's just cartilage is a real difficult tissue. It's not fast growing. It's not like, for instance, skin heals so quickly and skin graft takes so well and so forth. Cartilage is a different beast. It's much less biologically active. And that's where the sticking points are. I mean, we're talking about this like, you walk in the office and you just get your cartilage transplant, but really, I did 2 last year. And it's something that when you get right down to it, most patients are not candidates, but you can evaluate them and see, and every once in a while you do get a patient who does fit, but I think it's still very limited in its application, and hopefully it'll broaden.
So how much, when you're how much connection do you have, like, with the new advances that are coming out in science? Do you ever sort of distribute? How do I want to say this? Record what you've had success with, and that might influence some research someplace else, or do you just go to seminars where the research is happening and learn what's going on? How does that process work?
At the community level, it's more trickle down. For instance, the cartilage transplantation, a lot of that research has been done at New England Baptist. So we're very fortunate to have that happening in this area. And so they have a course every year, and I went to it a couple of years ago. They'll publish their series, and then we'll decide what we're capable of here at the local level. Sometimes, something that comes out of university sounds great, but when it trickles down to the local level, you find maybe it's not so great for your own patient population, because they have a more selective patient population there, as opposed to our population here, which just, is pretty much a broad spectrum of
All kinds of problems.
farmers to professionals, and they all walk through the door, and
Yeah.
Sorting through them versus sorting through a university population sometimes can confuse things a little bit.
Well, I would think too, some populations could be older.
Right.
You're dealing with an older population as
Right.
opposed to if you're here at university, maybe you're testing this out on 20-year-olds, and it's quite different.
Exactly, and you have to, at this level, when you're doing something that is still in its infancy as far as clinical application, you really want to be very careful to figure out exactly who is a good candidate. And what I typically do in my practice, if I have someone who exactly fits the profile described by New England Baptist, or whatever place has put out the study, I'll take care of that patient locally. If the patient does not fit the profile, I'll send them
Down to them.
and say, hey, listen, this patient's outside the normal spectrum. What are you doing with these people?
Yeah.
And if they write back and say there's not a good candidate, do this instead, that's fine. And if they say, well, we're kind of doing a study now on older patients, we'd like to keep them, then we let them get treated at New England Baptist. But we can do most stuff here. I don't want to make it sound like we send a lot of patients out.
Oh,
we're very
talking-
capable here.
Yeah, but we're talking about this
Yeah.
new science, this
Right.
sort of breaking ground
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff that you're getting. You're getting parts of it. We're doing it locally here, but not in the widest spectrum as where they're researching it. But I think that's one of the strengths of the hospital. Actually, is you know what you can do, and you do those pieces. And if someone requires some special attention, you never hesitate to send them out. So it's the good of the patient is always put first.
Yeah, and we're very capable of doing most things here, which is nice. The orthopedic services at Brattleboro Hospital are excellent, and while we do refer out some special cases, I think almost, I don't want to say almost all, but most orthopedic issues can be dealt with here. It's a very capable community hospital.
Good. Well, you have who are you in practice with? Tell us who you're in practice with.
Well, directly in practice with Elizabeth McLarney and John Thatcher. And then Dr. Kinley is still active, and although he's in a different practice, we work well together. There's really no competitive type situation there at all. So, again, good, capable.
It's a small town, so everybody has to work together.
Yeah. It doesn't happen in all small towns, so.
Well, then we should realize how fortunate we are. Tell us about your philosophy as far as your patient. If it's a patient coming in, how involved do you want the patient to be in your work and in their own health and healing? So it's sort of bedside manner. How do you bring the patient into the whole process?
Well, the patient has to be very involved because most orthopedic procedures involve some sort of rehabilitation. You can't just operate on the patient. It's not like removing an appendix and the patient's better. Fixing whatever problem the patient comes to you with is only part of it. Then they have to rehabilitate whatever injury part they have. So the patient has to be involved or it's not worthwhile to proceed. So I think the best way to do it is to find out what the patient's goal is. Because we have everything from middle-aged triathletes to teenage athletes to farmers to guys who cut down trees for a living, and each one has a different goal as far as getting better. And we have a lot of self-employed people here, a lot of craftsmen and so forth who have to get back to, if they don't build cabinets, they don't feed their family. So, their needs are different from a high school athlete who has time to rehab and has 9 months till the next soccer season to get better. So, you really have to customize to each individual, and our patient population is so broad here, you really have to focus on what the patient's goals are.
Do you find that's difficult sometimes getting people to listen to you as far as, because I've had both my knees operated on, just sort of cartilage kind of things, and the meniscus tears, and just listening to you and taking your advice is sometimes that's hard work. Getting a patient to say, if you take these 2 weeks off, you're going to be a lot better in the long run.
Yeah, it's a big problem. But
it's a big problem because you can't follow behind. You're going to do what they're going to do in a way.
Well, it's not jail. It's surgery, and people people can do what they want.
Yeah.
But and some people have to go back to work. Some people have to bring their kids to school, and they have to walk the day after surgery and so forth. And you just do the best you can. And also, a lot is thrown at patients, and you might think that you and the patient are on the same page with complete understanding about what's expected of them after surgery, and then you find out a week later that the message didn't get through, and that's it's my fault for not communicating it, and maybe the patient was afraid to ask questions. So you want to encourage people to ask questions if they're confused, and try to write as much stuff down, whatever it takes to make sure you're on the same page. Do the best you can.
One of the things that's the topic right now in healthcare is paying for it. And yet when I hear things in the news, it's mostly politicians talking. I seldom hear doctors talking about it, and I don't know if that's true. How doctors feel about the current situation? Because I think most people agree that we have tremendous health care in this country. We offer, I think, the best in the world here. But so it's a financing system that's got everybody in a tizzy.
Well, yeah, and what am I? I'm basically a small business, and what do? I pay a tremendous. One of my highest line items monthly is my health insurance premium, because I'm just a one-person business, so I fit into the small business category, and I pay the most I pay them in the highest category for private insurance. So. I look at it from both sides. I have this huge insurance expense, and at the same time, I have patients who are struggling to pay, and I have extra office staff just to deal with the chaos of our current system. So I don't, I wish I knew what the answer was. I suspect that the most efficient system would be a single payer. I think that
most efficient for paying for it, maybe.
Well. But I think the current system is tremendously flawed. I think the way that the system is set up and the way the system has kind of ingratiated itself into the politics. I don't know how to word it exactly, but even the Massachusetts plan, where you have to go buy insurance. Well, who's really doing the best under that plan is the insurers. And so. And the patients are still totally confused, and the physicians aren't really getting paid very well by a lot of these different plans. And I think a lot of us would be willing to accept whatever plan has to offer in paying us, as long as we know what that is, as opposed to the current kind of barter and bargain system where from month to month and year to year, we don't know what these 100 different plans we accept are going to pay, and we don't know what the burden is going to be for the patients from one month to the next. The patients are confused, the doctors are confused. My overhead is way too high because of the current system and the people who are employed just to deal with the administrative end of it. So, I mean, I think eventually the system as it is now is not going to work if you can think it's working now. So,
well, the
I don't know what the next step is. I'm not an administrator. I'm just
yeah, I know, I understand.
I'm on the losing end of it.
You're the end that gets continually to get squeezed.
Well, I get squeezed both ways. I don't know from month to month or year to year what I'm going to be paid. If the Medicare budget has to be balanced, they just cut our fees. It's an easy way to do it. And my rates for private insurance, my overhead for the insurance I pay for myself and my family goes up every year. So, as a small business owner, I'm getting hammered. And as a physician, it's just confusing. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know what's better, but the current system now just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I just wonder, given that Medicaid and Medicare, what they tend to do now, I think, is expand the program to cover more people without adding more dollars to support that expansion. And then so they expect everybody to take care of this new expansion for a little less money per person. And that's one of the big problems. So if that's happening right now with the government handling it, I don't know how it's going to be different under single payer. So
well,
we'll have to wait and see.
Well, you got to figure out how to pay for it. That's the thing. And look, if my life was easier, I pay $1,000 a month basically for health insurance for me. If you paid that in taxes instead and realized it was fairer, it'd be the same amount of money out of my pocket, but the system would be much better. And maybe if I have one less employee, because I don't have to deal with all these different insurance companies, maybe I actually come out ahead.
That would be.
I don't know, but I think, if a Martian came down and looked at the way we distribute health care in this country, this very wealthy country, they'd think it was crazy. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do know the system as it's set up now is really not that great. And the other thing is really, there's a tremendous fear of change, and I think a lot of physicians would not want to do anything, not change the system radically, because at least the system they have works kind of for them, and it's they're in this mode where they've kind of figured it out as best they can and so forth. So, and there's a tremendous distrust of change, because we know, for instance, with Medicare they cut our fees, and like you said, if they expand the program
and don't put more dollars in
it, I mean, you have to pay for it on the other end. Mm-hmm. Or the other solution is you do what you do in a lot of European countries. You ration. I mean, you're not going to get your kidney transplant. That's too expensive. You can't pay for 5 million vaccinations if you're doing heart transplants. And so they kind of ration. Or if you need a hip replacement, well, that's not an emergency. You can wait a year.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, patients, they come in, they've decided they want the hip replaced, and they've decided they want it done before Thanksgiving. And it's
2 weeks later, you're done.
Yeah, and we can accommodate that. And as much as people talk about Canada being great, that's not what happens in Canada, and it's not what happens in Germany and these other countries. So it's very tricky.
It is. The whole thing's very tricky. But I think the scariest part, as you said, when you mentioned people are reluctant for change. I think we're more reluctant for change because we don't know what that change is going to be and how it's going to work. We also have seen how different systems, once the government gets involved, morph into something quite different than what was intended originally.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff, makes people leery about what could happen.
Yeah, but listen, I completely agree, and that's why I'm a physician. I'm not a politician. I'm only speaking for myself. But I think, also speaking as someone who, a Greek American whose family is entirely made up of people who own pizzerias and stuff. I mean, the biggest drag on small business now is health insurance, and the reason why a lot of stuff is getting farmed out to other countries is not salaries. That's only a small percentage of the cost of supporting of these different products or services that are provided. I mean, a big chunk is benefits. It's health insurance and everything else too. If you have, for instance, you can send transcription services to India. Just overnight they transcribe your office notes, they send it back. The service itself is really not that much cheaper.
But you don't have to pay for the
line by
staff.
line. But then
Yeah.
the other costs, you're not paying for as much staff support, you're not paying for health insurance, you're not paying for all these other things, so that at the end the bottom line becomes much cheaper. So I
Yeah.
think it's a large burden on small business in this country, and something has to be done to remove that burden.
Well, I think people are looking at all kinds of things and input and, bringing up little points that might influence the conversation or what we need to do. So there we go.
Well, I wish I knew, because as a devil's advocate, you could counter any discussion with the bad side, and it really stymies creativity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go on to another piece
Something
here.
easier.
You are involved in you have a child who's has autism, and he's
Right.
12 years old now,
Right.
and his name is Jake.
Yeah.
And you've been really involved with his education, and to the point where you're just in the very beginning stages of trying to start a school for him. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, not only for him, but for other kids in his age group. Well, I think autism, first of all, is to say someone has autism is very difficult. It's like saying someone has cancer or something. There's many different types. There's many different levels. There's many different presentations. And so no two kids are alike. And when they're younger, there are strategies that are, without saying they're cookbook strategies, but there are ways to educate the kids when they're younger that seem to work and seem to be relatively streamlined, and you can kind of figure out what the kid needs. But as the children age, their strengths and weaknesses become more and more apparent, and they diverge tremendously. So a program that might work for kids as they're younger probably doesn't reach their needs as they get older.
Do you think educators really have a good handle on what is needed yet?
No.
I
I think
so.
For one thing, there's this wave of kids coming up. I mean, the incidence of autism is rising rapidly, and I think there's this wave of kids that, with all these different needs in the schools, really don't know what to do with them, and so and how to meet their specialized needs, and at the same time, have some sort of fiscal restraint, because you could really, the needs of each kid could be so tremendous and so varied that to provide services for each kid, the exact services each kid needs is very complicated.
Yeah. And it's you wish that we knew more, but it's any time I think you're dealing with a mental issue or a brain issue, there's so little that we know about the brain.
Well,
anyway, that it's very difficult to know sort of what to do. So if you're involved, basically what you're involved in is the whole learning process for yourself too.
Well, I think that it's just, the bigger issues of the research and what's going on and stuff at the level of educating your child is almost not as important as what does he need today?
Uh-huh.
What can we do to help this child communicate, to help him become productive? Currently the statistics are very dismal as far as functioning people with autism out in the world, independently functioning at a high level. Most are either in group homes or some sort of more institutionalized setting. Maybe they'll have a little bit of work, piecemeal work out there or something, but we have to improve that on that. I think that the investment in the kids as they're younger to try to get them to be more productive as they're older and less dependent on society is actually an investment in cost and the well-being of the families and the children involved.
And that's the thrust of the work that you're doing, is trying to help all these children advance as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, the school we're starting is, first of all, again, it's for adolescents, and that's the age group where the needs of the kids really seem to diverge, and there are, school systems, it's not meant to say that school systems don't do a good job with a lot of these kids, but there are definitely some kids who have needs that we might be able to better meet in the setting that we're trying to establish. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to have some vocational aspects to it. We're going to hopefully have some agricultural aspects. We're going to hopefully have some
woodworking or
more like we don't know yet.
Yeah,
if a kid comes to us and says I want to do woodworking, we want to try to meet that need.
Yeah.
We're going to try to meet the whole idea with autism is try to find out. It's hard to teach these kids something that's abstract that they're not interested in. You know, if we have a kid who's not interested in woodworking, we tell him, hey, we're going to go make a table. He's not going to do it.
Right.
You know, it's abstract, and what do I want to make this table for? But if you have a kid who really wants to make a table, well, you can teach him math because you have to measure the table. You know, you have to figure out the dimensions. You have to design it. So you can teach him some drafting. You know, so if you have a kid who's interested, and then you can take some plans off the internet and he can read them. So all of a sudden you've got a reading lesson, you've got a math lesson, you've got communication components because you have to work with whoever's helping them. So if you can find something a kid's interested in, you can meet his needs, because people with autism are not blank slates, but they're not able to abstract. So you have to find areas of interest for them, and then you can take off with it. There's a child down in Greenfield who's got this thing about fans. Well, now he can design fans, he can count how many times they spin, he can, read about fans on the internet. So they basically took his interest, and instead of saying, hey, this kid's obsessed with fans, this is terrible, they used it as a tool. So, if we, we'll try to take these children and find out what their interests are, and maybe better be able to individualize what they need and expand it upon it and meet all their educational needs through these interests, as opposed to a different setting which might be more cookie cutter or rigid because they're dealing with different numbers or a broader population.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking for a school that will meet their needs in a tailored fashion, just specific to what interests that particular child. And you're in the beginning stages of this project,
right?
Which is very exciting, especially since I think we have a lot of people who might be interested in this, and we'll list your personal email address underneath if people want to send you emails asking questions or seeing how they could help.
Exactly, and it's in its infancy. We're shooting to open in September of 2008. We still don't have a lot of pieces in place, and we have some very interested people. It's amazing the people who just show up at your door and say, hey, we heard about this and we want to help. Already we've had people come up to us who we weren't even knew that we were up to this, offering to help. And it's, our housekeeper had a tag sale and handed us an envelope of money the other day. And it was unbelievable, so anyways, we're in the stages. We're in the process of applying for our nonprofit status. We're in the process of meeting with people who can educate us about the different regulations involved in starting a school. So it's really in its infancy, but it's moving forward.
I think this could be a tremendous service to the whole area. It sounds fabulous. So we'll list your email address so people can get a hold of you, and hopefully word of mouth spreads, and this, takes off and meets your dream here.
Well, we hope so. We hope to open next year. We hope to fill a niche or a need that for the children of the area that we don't want to compete with or battle with local school districts. We want to provide a service that perhaps they can't meet. We have to figure out a way to do it in such a way that it's not a burden financially on the school districts or the children or their families. So there's a lot that we have to accomplish, and we're just starting. We're very excited about it. We have some really good people helping us. We're looking for more good people. Anybody out there who wants to help, who has a skill that can help us, that would be great. It's going to take money. If someone just says, I don't have a skill, but I have some money, hey, we'll take it. Whatever.
Okay.
It's a really worthwhile project.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. And we thank you all for watching. You've been watching Neighbor to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I've been here with Dr. Bill Vranos. And we thank you for watching. We'll see you on our next show.